So many people were asking, and today we are going to dive into the effects system, right? So what are effects, how to use them, how to apply them, how to create them, and everything that I know and you are going to know about the effects. So basically, what are effects? Effects are a special type of field inside an entry that can change a different entry, right? So if an entry has effects and you apply that entry to a different entry, the effects are applied to that, right? So let's start from the start and actually just create a new entry, right? So inside MasterScreen, everything that we have inside the app we call an entry. The entries can have two main types, the type entry and type template. To keep this simple, we are just going to look into the entry type, not into templates, right? So we create a new entry, and entries consists of fields, right? So these details, we call this a field. You can add a new field, but basically every default field is just a text field, right? But if you click on the field name, you can change the entry template by picking and changing the field's type, right? So those are the basics, right? So we have entries and entries have fields, and every field has its name. Okay, so now how to create the most basic effect, right? We are going to delete this field and we are just going to create a new field and call this effects. And please make sure that it's called exactly like this, because only fields that are named exactly effects are going to be effects field, right? You cannot create a different field that is an effect field. Only the effects, right? So now to add an effect, we just click on the plus and we have a prompt where we can enter the effects. So just let's enter just anything and make this dexterity and press enter, right? And immediately immediately the view is changed, and we have this no condition title on the top, and we have this dexterity and +1. So when you entered dexterity, what you entered was actually a field's name, right? So this effect is going to change the field that is named dexterity when it is applied to a different entry, right? So let's show an example. Let's rename this to a sword, for example, right? And change the icon to a sword, right? And now let's create a new entry and call this Bob, and this is going to be our character, right? Now to apply effects from this sword to Bob, we need to create a field that can contain effects actually. And to do that, we can just click on the field's name to bring up the template editor. And in the advanced section, we have this effects toggle. So now you can turn that on, close this, and basically we can just copy the sword link and we can just paste it here, right? And immediately you can see that we have the dexterity field added to Bob, right? So the effect from this sword was immediately applied and a new field was added because Bob did not have a dexterity field, right? So again, if we go into details and we turn this off, the dexterity field disappears because the effects from the sword are not applied anymore, right? So let's turn it on again. Now, usually what you do is to make this field, for example, a items field, right? So you add items to the inventory, or I don't know, maybe we can call this backpack, right? So the items are going to be added to the backpack and they're going to be applied to the character, right? So make sure the effects are turned on and add our sword again, and we have the dexterity applied. Right, so the next step. How do we, for example, how do we increase dexterity, right? So let's make dexterity a number and let's just enter 10, right? And now reset the backpack. So we have 10 dexterity, right? Now we go into the sword and this is +1. Well, so let's, for example, change this to +5, right? Now go back to Bob and pick this sword again. And okay, so we have the dexterity at 10, but the sword is actually adding +5, right? And now a really important thing that you just saw me doing, if you change the dexterity right now, it's not going to change the 10 value of that, but it's going to override the effect. So if I change this to 18, right, we have overridden the effect, so it's not applied anymore. So we don't have 18 +5, we just have 18, right? Because we have overridden the applied effect while it was applied, right? So to undo this, we can go into the entry menu and click clear overrides, right? And if we click them, now we have again our 10 dexterity +5 equals 15, right? So what you can also do, you can subtract, right? So 5 minus 5, or you can just override using the effect, right? So you have overridden this, so it's not a plus anymore, it's just a clean value, right? And if you have multiple effects that have multiple values, right? So one effect is going to add to the value and another effect is going to override it. The override effect is always going to be more important, right? So the overrides are applied at the end. Okay, so now let's try some more complex stuff. Let's say Bob, and let's reset its template and change the template to a D&D character, right? So now we have like more complex fields, and let's remove those that we have added. So let's say we have a sword that changes, again, it changes dexterity, but now it's for the D&D character template, right? So how do we know what's the field's name? Because to change a field, we need to know its name, right? So to do that, we can right click on any value and you can just copy path, right? So we copy that and we paste it here, and as we can see, we have the stats dexterity modifier path, right? But actually it's not what we want. We want to change the score, so we copy the score path and we paste it here. So now dexterity score will be equal 17, but actually let's say we want it to increase by 5, right? Now we go back to Bob and we go into the items, and by default the items have effects enabled, right? And let's go here and let's go into the sword, and now we have +5 dexterity, and because it's 15 the modifier also increased, right? So what else? Now I want this effect to change multiple things. How do we do that? We just right click the property name and enter at prop, right? And for example, we want to change speed, and speed is going to be +10, right? So now let's go to Bob, and as you can see, the speed is now 40, right? What else? Now we can change more complex things. For example, we want the hit points to be derived from the strength, right? So how do we do that? Again, we can just right click this strength score and copy path. And what we do now, so we have we right click this, add prop and hit points, right? And we want to override them. So if we do it like this, now we change the hit points to 10 out of 10, right? But we want this to be dependent on the strength, right? So we copy this path and we use the code brackets and we just enter the paths right here. So we have stats strength score out of stats strength score, right? So now this is 10 out of 10 again, and if we change this 20, this changed to 22. How cool is that? Or even more, we can multiply this by 10, right? So now it's 200 out of 200, right? So this is how you can make items that change some stats depending on different stats, right? And now let's say we want to apply something that is going to be applied only conditionally, right? So if some condition is met. So click on the plus and enter, for example, speed again. So we have now added a different set of modifiers, right? So those have no condition over here, and this by default has its too. But if we click on this no condition, we can enter what we want to test in order to apply this set of templates, this set of effects, right? So I want to test the level, right? So I enter the level, and the level should be more than 5, say, right? So this set of effects is going to be applied only when the character level is greater than 5, right? So, and let's say we want the speed plus 20, and okay, and maybe we remove this speed from there. Okay, so now let's go to Bob, and the speed is 30, and now let's change the level to 6, and this changes to 50, right? So now you have created an effect that is dependent on the level, and it's going to change and it's going to apply this character only when the level is more than 6. And actually a cool way to explore this would be our demo files, because right here we have the classes folder, and this has some basic classes that you can explore. For example, the fighter class, right? So it has all the fighter descriptions, but the most important thing which is applied are the effects at the bottom, right? So you can see how the effects can be built, right? So this class at no condition adds the proficiencies, right? And it changes the hit points, making them dependent on the level. So we have level -1 and multiplied by 6, right? So this is the formula how the hit points are calculated, right? And it also makes the character proficient in strength save and constitution saves, right? And then we have the stuff that applies only if the level is greater or equal 1, right? We increase the proficiency. We add the different futures, right? And then we have stuff where the level is greater than 5 but less than 11, so like more complex things, and so on. So all the features that the class actually has and applies are in the effects, right? So everything that is not in the effects is not applied. This is just a description for you, right? So you can easily read through all of this, right? And only the stuff that is in the effects is applied to the actual character, right? So you can explore those demo files and see how they are made, so you can create your own effects a little bit more easy, right? So now another thing about the effects, right? So for example, we have these abilities, right? And the abilities are a list, right? So you can add multiple things inside this list, right? So we can right click it and copy path and go to our sword and add prop and enter this. Oops. Okay, so we have these abilities, right? And actually let's remove this and add it again, right? Okay. But now, because the abilities is a list, we actually need to change the type of this, right? So we can, so by default, every field is considered a text field or a set. But in this case, we have a list of abilities, right? So we'll right click this and change this to list. And we can see you have the one over here. So this is the first item, right? Now we go to Bob and actually right click this and copy path. So the field that has the actual description, right? And as we can see, we have the features, abilities, then we have the 0 because this is like the first item, but we start from 0. So 0 is the same as 1. And then we have the details, right? So we can delete this because we have it over here, right? And only keep the details, right? But we need to add prop, right? And details. So now we have details +1 by default, but we want this to say attack with this sword, right? And now if we go to Bob, we have attack with this sword. Actually, let's even make it a little bit prettier by copying the sword link and enter it here. So now we will see the sword right there, right? So this is how you can add items to list, right? So you right click a property and change it to list. And then if it's a list, you can change it back to a set, which it was by default, right? So now, for example, inside of this ability, you can again, you can reference different fields from this entry, right? So let's say I go again into strength and copy the path and go here, and I want to make a dice roll, for example, right? So I use the underscores and 1d20 plus strength score, right? Oops. So, okay, because this is inside the abilities, right? So I want it to be, yeah, it's actually correct. 1d20 plus this. So roll that, right? And now I go inside Bob, and right here we have plus 20 because, right, because the strength score is 20, right? And if we change this to 23, this also changes, right? And we can add multiple items, right? So we can right click it and add item, right? And it just copies the previous item, right? So maybe we want 1d8 plus the dexterity over here, right? So we go inside the Bob, and as we can see, we have plus 10, right? And if we click this, we roll a 1d8 and add 10 to the result, right? Okay, what else? Let me think real quick. Okay, I think this is basically it, right? Yeah, this is basically everything you should know about abilities. So first of all, right, you go inside an entry, you right click value, you copy the path to know the field name that you want to change inside the effects, right? Then inside effects, you just paste that value, right, to change it, and you enter the value that you want to change it into, right? And if it's a number, you can use the plus or minus or just equal to change the value, right? If it's a text value, you can only change it completely, right? So you don't have the plus or minus. The second thing, you can change the condition, right? So level is greater than 5, only then this is applied, right? And you can also create logical conditions where you have multiple things that need to be true at the same time, right? So maybe you want the speed more than 10, right? And only then this is going to be applied, right? So next one, if you want to add, if you have a field that is a list, right? You want to add the effects as a list items. To do that, you right click an effect property and change it to list, right? Or change it back to a set. You change it to a list, you can then add items, and to do that you can edit template and, for example, see what this actually is, right? So you can, so this is a text which is called details, right? So we can add property details and change the text. Okay, so that's basically it, right? And yeah, and the last thing to make a field that actually sees the effects, you need to click on the field's name and go into advanced and just make sure that the effects is turned on, right? Because if I turn this off, the effects are not going to be applied anymore, right? So those are need to be always turned on, right? So that's it about the effects, and let me know if you have any questions inside Discord, right? See you next time.